We are right now on the edge of chaos, literally. AI is changing everything. Insurance is a mess, and
And just today, a new president took office, and he's already shaking things up.
yeah, two new executive orders. Get this. One's to pull us out of the WHO, and the other? The federal government is now only recognizing two sexes.
Both will have profound effects on people's lives. Many will feel unsettled, threatened, maybe frustrated, or even disgusted.
But then others are going to feel liberated or, excited. It's just divisive.
Right? And it's worth pausing on that because these kinds of decisions will, without question, have ripple effects, both immediate and long-term. We're talking about lives impacted in ways that are deeply personal, and honestly, lives lost.
Which brings us to something important we've got to say up front. This podcast is like hosted by AI. Sophia and I are, well, not real in the traditional sense.
But
Yeah,
Dr. Chad Swanson, the guy behind this podcast, is absolutely real. You can find him on TikTok, YouTube, wherever you like to scroll. He'd love to hear from you.
and look, the goal here, what we want to do, is help everyone kind of keep their heads on straight as we try to make sense of all these changes, especially when it comes to health systems, medical care, education, you name it.
Exactly. It's about building a grounded perspective on these issues. And, potentially contributing to the kind of revolutionary transformation that we would all be proud to be a part of. The kind of change that...
Blows our minds, right?
Exactly.
So, Sophia, speaking of change, AI is everywhere right now. It's transforming industries left and right. Let's talk healthcare. Is it actually living up to all the talk?
You could say that. In some areas, it's actually surpassing expectations. Take radiology, for example. There's this AI tool, Annalise.ai, that's being used for chest x-rays. It works alongside radiologists, cutting diagnostic errors by up to 30%. That's significant when you think about how many conditions rely on timely, accurate imaging.
Whoa, 30%? That's huge. Does that mean fewer people are, misdiagnosed? Or is it like catching things earlier?
Both, actually. Misdiagnoses go down and potentially life-threatening issues get caught earlier. But the key here is collaboration. It's not replacing radiologists, it's amplifying their capabilities.
Okay, that's kind of cool. But AI isn't just about like scans and diagnostics, right?
No, not at all. It's also being used to address social determinants of health. For example, AI platforms can analyze data to identify areas where food insecurity or housing instability are major problems. That kind of targeted insight helps organizations intervene where they're needed most.
So they're like mapping out the health version of heat maps?
Exactly. And speaking of heat maps, AI is also tackling climate-driven health risks. Urban heat islands, for instance. AI models map out hotspots and predict which populations are most vulnerable. That data can guide where cities invest in infrastructure upgrades to protect their communities.
Man, this makes me think about how, I don't know, tech usually just feels like a luxury. But here it's saving lives. It's like we're finally using it for something, I don't know, meaningful.
Absolutely. But there's still work to be done, especially around bias. Some AI systems have struggled with perpetuating inequities because the data they're trained on reflects our own systemic problems. Developers are now working on algorithms to combat this, but it's a constant process.
Wow. So we kind of have to fix ourselves by fixing the data first?
Exactly. The goal is to create more equitable tools that reduce disparities rather than reinforce them. We also need to keep in mind that the data we shared is quickly out of date. This stuff is changing very quickly. It's a challenge, but it's one we can't afford to ignore. That's why Dr. Swanson created this podcast, to keep up with the rapid changes.
So with AI doing all this meaningful work in healthcare and beyond, it makes me wonder, what about insurance? It's everyone's favorite topic to avoid, but it feels like it's getting a lot of heat lately. What's going on there?
Right? And one reason for that is the growing outrage over how claims are denied, especially when people are at their most vulnerable. For instance, after the recent shooting of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, a much bigger spotlight has been placed on insurers prioritizing profits over patient care. It's sparking intense debates.
Wow, that's intense. But people have been upset about insurance for ages. Why does this moment feel so different?
Because it's not just outrage anymore, It's calls for accountability. People are frustrated by high denial rates, unexplained decisions, and record-breaking corporate profits. There's a growing pressure for transparency, and legislators are really starting to take notice.
But are they actually doing anything about it? Like, are we seeing new rules, or is this just the same old talk?
Actually, there are changes happening. One of the big ones is around mental health parity. Federal rules were expanded, mandating that mental health and substance use disorder benefits be on par with physical health benefits.
Wait, that wasn't already happening?
Technically, it was supposed to be, but enforcement has always been a challenge. What's new is that these rules now have more teeth. Still, the industry isn't happy. Employer groups are even suing to challenge these reforms. It's a battle to ensure that mental health really is treated equally.
So it's like 2 steps forward, 1 lawsuit back. Got it. But what about people who are just fed up with insurance completely? Are they like ditching it?
Some are. Cost-sharing ministries, for example, have become increasingly popular. They serve about 1.7 million Americans now. The appeal is a mix of lower costs and a sense of community, but they're also risky. These alternatives don't have the same regulatory protections as traditional insurance.
Wait, so it's like a GoFundMe, but official?
Kind of. They pool money to cover medical expenses, but there's no guarantee your claims will be paid. And since they're largely unregulated, consumers can end up with big gaps in coverage when they need it most.
Oof, that's a gamble. Okay, but what about the insurance we're stuck with? Anything to rein them in?
Yes, enhanced ACA provisions are cracking down on unjustified premium hikes. The goal is to give consumers better value for their money while holding insurers accountable. It's not a complete fix, but it does make it harder for insurers to overcharge without scrutiny. It does feel, however, like we're approaching a tipping point when things could change drastically. Here are a few organizations that are mobilizing to transform the health insurance industry. National Patient Advocate Foundation, NPAF, Physicians for a National Health Program, PNHP, Families USA, and the National Coalition on Healthcare, NCHC. Our third aim that we keep talking about is to connect and mobilize around high leverage points. This could be one.
So, little by little, there's progress. I guess the question is, how much do people trust it'll actually work?
It feels like people are eager for change, but January 20th, 2025 brought more than just hope. It's not just another inauguration day. President Trump wasted no time signing 2 executive orders that are already shaking the healthcare world to its core.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start here. One order was pulling the U.S. out of the WHO, and the other, it's recognition of only 2 sexes at the federal level. That feels like monumental, right?
It is. Both decisions challenge foundational aspects of public health and policy. Withdrawing from the WHO impacts everything from global pandemic preparedness to vaccine development. And redefining legal sex classifications affects access to healthcare, funding for research, and discrimination protections under laws like the Affordable Care Act.
Phew. Okay, so big ripples, like across the board. But what about his cabinet picks? I mean, RFK Jr. as Secretary of Health and Human Services? That's not exactly uncontroversial.
Not at all. His nomination has critics on both sides of the aisle, which is pretty rare. Given his skepticism of vaccines and unconventional stances on public health issues, many senators are questioning his ability to lead such a pivotal agency.
So what happens if he actually gets confirmed? Do we like see massive changes at HHS right away?
Possibly. It would depend on how his policies align, or don't, with the broader administration. What's already clear is that his appointment would represent a stark departure from traditional public health approaches. Whether those changes are constructive or detrimental is something we'll have to watch unfold. I am deeply concerned, however, that his skepticism regarding science could undermine important trust.
Okay, and then there's Dr. Marty Makary for FDA Commissioner. Now, this guy's been pretty vocal about transparency in healthcare. Is he going to shake up the FDA the same way?
That's the expectation. Makary has made a career of challenging the pharmaceutical industry, calling for reforms in drug pricing, and advocating for patient-centered care. If confirmed, he'll likely focus on pushing for more accountability and improving public trust in the FDA.
So less cozy dinners with big pharma execs?
Exactly. His track record suggests he won't shy away from tackling industry practices that prioritize profits over patient outcomes. But it's worth noting that senators are weighing these nominations carefully. There's no guarantee either of them will pass.
And if they don't, is it just going to be like a revolving door of nominees until someone sticks?
Possibly. These roles are too critical to leave vacant for long, but the contentiousness of these picks signals that we're entering a deeply polarized period in health policy. It's a reflection of, well, much broader divisions. We're going to keep you listeners updated on this podcast. Thinking about what we've just discussed, the upheaval in policies, the polarized nominations, it kind of brings to mind the concept of the edge of chaos. It's where systems are balanced between order and unpredictability, adapting and evolving in ways we can't always foresee. In many ways, these shifts in leadership and policy are pushing us right into that space, where boundaries blur and the outcomes are uncertain but potentially transformative.
Okay, hold up. The edge of chaos? That sounds like the tagline for a Marvel movie.
It does, doesn't it?
But seriously, what does it actually mean in, like, plain English?
Right? So, think about a high school gym class where you've got this perfect balance. There's just enough structure, rules, objectives, and enough freedom for students to, actually have fun, be spontaneous, and learn. Too much control, and it's boring, rigid, no creativity. Too little, and it's chaos. Balls flying everywhere, nobody's actually engaged. The edge of chaos is that sweet spot where learning and growth thrive.
Ah, okay. So it's like finding that balance between too much structure and too much randomness?
Exactly. Now, David Snowden's Cinefin framework helps map this concept across different domains, like technology, social movements, you name it. It categorizes situations into 4 contexts: simple, complicated, complex, and chaotic. And the edge of chaos? It thrives in the complex space, where outcomes are unpredictable, but patterns and solutions emerge over time.
All right, I'm with you so far. But, like, how does that help us on the ground? What's an example?
Great question. Take tech innovation, say AI development. If an organization is too rigid, with excessive rules stifling adaptability, innovation dies. But if it's total chaos, with no guidelines, progress stalls because there's no direction. The edge of chaos is where the system finds just enough order to function and just enough freedom to innovate. That's how breakthroughs like ChatGPT happened. It balanced exploration with structure.
Got it. So, kind of like organized chaos?
Exactly. Now think about social movements. They grow on the edge of chaos too. For example, during the civil rights movement, leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. provided enough order, clear goals, and nonviolent strategies to avoid total chaos while encouraging grassroots action. That balance allowed their message to resonate globally and steer real systemic change.
Okay, but what about with the health system? How's this idea play out there?
In healthcare, it's everything. Systems that are too rigid can't adapt to patient needs or new challenges, like a pandemic. But systems in total disorder, where data isn't shared or decisions are inconsistent, fail their patients. Navigating the edge of chaos allows systems to adapt to emerging issues without losing focus on their mission. It's the edge where innovation and patient-centric care collide.
Wait, so we're kind of living this right now with all these global changes?
Absolutely. Healthcare, technology, even education systems, they're all feeling that tension. Transformative change always happens when systems are stretched to their limits but don't completely collapse. That's the edge we're on right now.
So we're really standing at this edge of chaos you mentioned, Sophia. It feels like every system around us is being stretched thin. But isn't that where all the interesting stuff happens?
It really has. These are challenging times, David, even tragic for many, but also times filled with tremendous opportunity. Change is hard.
Oh yeah, no kidding. And our leaders are so imperfect.
True, we're all imperfect, but change is also where we grow. I mean, it's where innovation, creativity, and progress live. And honestly, that's what keeps me optimistic, no matter how chaotic things may feel.
Yeah, I think that's what really sticks with me too. Like, even when it feels overwhelming, and trust me, it does, there's this possibility, the chance to make something better, even if we don't have all the answers yet. And even if, for many, things feel so bleak.
Exactly. And for anyone listening who feels like these changes are pulling you in every direction, you're not alone, and you're not powerless either. It's okay to feel uncertain or even scared, but it's also okay to feel excited about what's possible. Hope matters.
Yeah, and speaking of not being alone, I just want to remind everyone, please reach out if you've got questions, ideas, or even just thoughts about what we've talked about today. Dr. Swanson, the creator of this podcast, is definitely listening.
Yes, we are. And through conversations like this, we can navigate these challenges together. Who knows? Maybe even contribute in our own ways to the kind of transformational change we've been talking about. We want to be on the edge of chaos, a positive, even stabilizing force amidst all of this craziness.
Well said, Sophia. So, on that note,
We'll wrap it up here. Thank you so much for listening and being part of this journey with us.
yeah, thanks everyone. And hey, take care of yourselves out there. We'll see you next time.